Hello, welcome to Chapter 5, Section 4. I'm working on completing the square. I'm doing the guided practice problems on page 345. If you're looking at the PDF electronic version, it's actually, for this chapter, just page 36. We're going to do problems 2, 3, and 4, which say solve each equation. And I'm going to be clear about this. This is what the directions say in the book, but I'm going to be clear about this. We're not going to estimate. So if I end up with a radical of a number that I don't know, no estimation. We're going to leave everything as exact answers, even if I have to leave a radical in it. All right, let's get started with problem number 2. I have x subtract 2, this whole quantity, x subtract 2 is times x subtract 2, which means I'm squaring it. That equals 16. Subtract 2 squared equals 16. The inverse of an exponent is a radical, so I'm going to take the square root, and don't forget I get one positive, one negative. This gives x subtract 2 equals plus or minus 4. Since that's a perfect square, and when I take the square root, the radical drops out. I simplified it and the radical is no longer needed. This means I can split it into two equations, because I actually have two equations here, and solve both of them. X subtract 2 equals positive 4. X subtract 2 equals negative 4. If I add 2, I get x equals 6. If I add 2, I get x equals negative 2. Please notice something. The x subtract 2 didn't change. It was only the 4 and the negative 4. Those are the things that changed. So when I have x subtract 2 here and x subtract 2 here, whatever I do to both sides is going to be the same in both parts. Let's do problem number 3. Problem number 3 is almost like problem number 2, except I have to actually put this in exponent form. So I notice that this is a perfect square trinomial. 25 is a perfect square. 5 times 5 or negative 5 times negative 5. Looks like it's going to be negative. So this is x subtract 5 to the second power equals 16. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Again, I get my plus or minus. And I get x subtract 5 equals plus or minus 4, just like I got plus or minus 4 here. I don't know why they picked 16 for both of these. Since the radical is not included with the simplification, there's no more radical, I can keep working. X subtract 5 equals positive 4. Add 5, and x equals 9. X subtract 5 equals negative 4. Add 5, just like over here I added 5 because I'm subtracting 5 from my x for both sides. I get x equals 1. So 9 and 1. Number 4, something different is going to happen that you're going to be seeing on some of the other examples. So I get x squared subtract 2x plus 1. I notice that that's x subtract 1 squared. That's my perfect square trinomial. How do I know it's a perfect square trinomial? You need to check this sheet that I talked about in one of the earlier videos. For this one it was already started, but for that one I had a 25, and for that one I have a 1. Both 25 and 1 are perfect squares. And the square root of 1 is either 1 or negative 1. Because that's negative, I use a negative 1. This still equals 3. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, don't forget the plus or minus, and I get x subtract 1 equals plus or minus square root of 3. 3 is not a perfect square. 16 was a perfect square. Because 3 is not a perfect square, I leave it just square root of 3. You're not going to use this. No estimation. Just leave it square root of 3. I'm going to add 1 to both sides, and I'm going to write it like this. X equals positive 1 plus or minus the square root of 3. Now, You're okay if you write it that way, as long as you know what it means. How am I going to know that you don't know what it means? You're going to go back to this problem, and if you give me this, x equals 5 plus or minus 4, and you stop, you're going to be banned from using the plus or minus. So be warned. In this case, this is 1 plus square root of 3, 1 subtract square root of 3. Those are okay, but they cannot be simplified. So that's why it's all right just to say plus or minus square root of 3. See you in the next video.